Hello, everyone, and namaste. Welcome to CMS VATAVARAN Talks, a series of online discussions and webinars. CMS VATAVARAN is on a mission of accelerating solutions for planetary well-being by leveraging communication technologies and techniques and curating collaborative spaces like this talk today. My name is Vasanti, and I will be your host and moderating this talk. Today, the topic is harmony with nature and sustainable development, which is also the theme of the International Day for Biological Diversity on May 22nd, 2025, this year. Clearly, given the triple planetary crisis that we are all facing, we all know about pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, we all need to re-examine our relationship to the natural world. One thing is certain, that despite all the technological advances, we are completely dependent on healthy and vibrant ecosystems, whether it's for water, food, medicines, clothes, fuel, shelter, energy, our livelihoods, and much more. We just have 5 more years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. What and how can we race towards this goal and nurture policies, programs, and lifestyles that live in harmony with nature? This is what we will discuss today with three very eminent guests, all very experienced and working at various levels on the same mission. Let me introduce them to you. Mr. Piyush Dogra, he's a senior environmental specialist in the South Asia region of the World Bank. Based in New Delhi, he is leading bank operations on environment, natural resource management, forestry, agriculture, hydro, and other energy sources in India. An environmental engineer by education, he has also worked in the government of Himachal Pradesh before joining the bank. Let me now introduce you to Dr. Pradip V. Sarmokadam, who is the member secretary of the Goa State Biodiversity Board and the nodal officer for the Goa State Wetland Authority. He oversees the state's wetland and climate change steering committees. He has a doctorate in earth sciences and brings more than 2 decades of experience spanning industry and government. Now comes Mr. Southey, who is the CEO of the Canadian Wildlife Federation and the chair of the IUCN Commission on Education and Communication, IUCN CEC for short. With more than 30 years of experience in international development and communications, he has held leadership roles across public, private, and non-profit sectors. Sean is an economist by education and has lived and worked and traveled in over 125 countries. Wow. Thank you all and welcome once again to this talk, and I appreciate you joining us on this day for this discussion. Let me start with Mr. Pradip, Dr. Pradip. Dr. Pradip, I think let's start from the ground. You are the one who's working in Goa right now. From the perspective of Goa State Biodiversity Board, what are the primary challenges and successes in linking biodiversity conservation with sustainable development within the state's very unique ecological and socio-economic context?
Yes.
Over to you, Dr. Pradip.
So much. Thank you so much for having me. And greetings to all of you on this World Environment Day with a unique theme of harmony and sustainability. These two terms are very important. When we talk about harmony and sustainability, we have to understand that the time since immemorial, we have been always harmonious with nature. If you see our ancestors and the previous generations, definitely what we are inheriting is because they were harmonious. And also, sustainability comes because we have started something which is development. And whether it is sustainable or whether it is equitable and whether it is in line with the pace of natural change are important questions. As you said about the 3 problems, biodiversity loss, pollution, climate change, and desertification is a very important thing which is happening everywhere. It is a matter that we should not, take lightly, and the whole world is united and looking at solving this problem with the nature-based solutions and several things. But at the same time, from the ground, let me say that we have a fragile ecosystem around, and it has been preserved by the people so far. So I always say that, can the governments conserve biodiversity, or can we just facilitate? And that's the important thing, that the Biodiversity Act, which is there in our country, or the text that is there in conventions, which is followed all over the globe, talks about conservation as the apex objective. And when we do this, who can do the conservation? I'm sure that all the governments put together, all the universities put entire process. We cannot have multiple layers of law where the penetration is less, or we cannot have, parallel law which are contradictory to each other. So I think we are living in the world which is guided by the law, and our ancestors lived in the world which was guided by their ethics. So we have these two things, and that's why I always give an example of sacred groves as a best example of conservation, because they are controlled by bioecocultural protocols rather than the law or legal framework. And looking at this, if we want to achieve the harmony, I think we have to achieve a healthy system that ensures the conservation. Sustainability is not mere a term, but it has to be reflecting right from our lifestyles. And lifestyle for environment is a great mantra that Honorable Prime Minister has given. And we have to really ensure that our extravagant lifestyles, which are based on the materialistic, unending greed, much more beyond our needs, we have to look at it. So coming from the ground, I would like to sum up that we have a great network of biodiversity committees that we have constituted in our state. We have a very, very high quality people's biodiversity registers, which we are preparing. It is a baseline of our biodiversity. And we are not just making it like a document, but we are deriving the conservation focus from there. And while we derive conservation focus, we try to ensure maximum participation, because it is a participatory rural conservation practice where people will feel part of the system, part of the plan, and part of the action. So that is what I would like to come. We have done this right from plantation initiatives, fisheries conservation, invasive management. We are doing several things on the ground, which we can talk when the time comes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very nice to hear, Dr. Pradip, because I'm happy to hear about the participatory mode that you are in, and also how the communities are being involved in all the conservation efforts, whether it's with the biodiversity register or with the plantation drives or all the work that you're doing. Now let's go up from community, and of course every conservation drive, the community is the key, but the policies and the programs that we all develop and which you also develop also matter. So let me go now to Mr. Piyush Dogra, who I want to ask him, how do institutions like the World Bank, strategically integrate these biodiversity considerations that Dr. Pradip just talked about into large-scale development projects? Because these are important, they're important for a nation like India to be implementing these. But how do you ensure that they can contribute positively to both environment sustainability and economic development?
Thanks, Dr. Vasanti, and thanks for having me here in this important day, which will be on 22nd. And I'm glad that we are contributing and we're discussing about biodiversity, which is the need of the day. We must invest in biodiversity now. That's what bank is also propagating as far as the new mantra in bank is concerned. But as far as our strategical integration is concerned, which you rightly asked about the biodiversity conservation in the large scale development project, this is done in a very sequential manner, and there is also a strategy behind which the World Bank operates. As you know, that biodiversity has three types of levels: genetic, species, and ecological. World Bank addresses biodiversity through areas like species, habitat, ecosystems, and landscapes through its operations and initiatives. Now, as I mentioned that, bank has said that, it's the time for investing in biodiversity. And for that reason, World Bank's new vision and mission aligns it very well to create the world free of poverty on a livable planet. So it has included a new word to it, that means a world free of poverty on a livable planet. And that clearly identifies protecting biodiversity and nature as one of the 8 global challenges. It has also launched Forest for Development, Climate and Biodiversity as one of the 6 global challenge programs. So it's totally aligned. Now, what are the strategies? If we go further into it, the strategies are multifold. For example, the strategic approaches are into environment and social safeguards, where these safeguards guide project planning and implementation and ensures that the biodiversity considerations are integrated into the project. So that's a risk management in one sense, very clearly. There is also biodiversity offsets. This is a different approach, that where the risk cannot be mitigated, let it be compensated for the loss of biodiversity in investing into conservation. And I'm glad that Dr. Pradip just mentioned about sacred groves, one of the important conservation area in northeastern, where this could be one important aspect. Then comes integrated landscape management approaches. So now we don't work in an agricultural landscape or in a forestry landscape, but in an integrated landscape, where we bring in holistic approach, considering ecosystem, including human activities in the project planning itself, so that then your biodiversity aspects are duly taken care. When we talk about methodologies, we have brought in strategic environmental assessments, which evaluates environmental impacts of policies, plans, and programs, which includes biodiversity specifically. Then you have payment for economic ecosystem services. PES compensate landowners for managing their land in the way that provides ecological benefits. Though it's evolving, a lot of good work has gone in Costa Rica and other places, but in India, we are also introducing this as one of the important considerations for the biodiversity management. Third is very important point, which Dr. Pradip also brought in, community-based natural resource management. And you were also emphasizing clearly, engaging local communities in management of natural resource, achieving better biodiversity outcomes. And this, I would refer that, the new projects which we are bringing in India in the name of enhancement of livelihood and ecosystems element for northeastern states like Tripura and Nagaland, and what we have done in Meghalaya clearly brings in this approach, and this has paid as one of the important impactful work as far as the community-based natural resource management are concerned. We have international case studies related to this. If I really cite examples, West Africa regional fisheries, where the improved fisheries legislation in 6 of the countries. Namthun hydro project brought in enhanced protected area in a large infrastructure project. This is in Lao PDR. Marine coastal protected establishment of around 116 million hectares of marine coastal protected areas. These are few of the good initiatives which can be brought in as good practices, but there are many such examples in the World Bank operations. So to answer your question very clearly, that these strategies and approaches and methodology, the World Bank is ensuring that biodiversity considerations are integrated not only in all the project but also in the large scale development project. This integration will contribute to the environment sustainability and will also support the economic development. I'll stop here, Dr. Vasanti.
Thank you, Dr. Piyush, for that explanation and giving some examples, and also elucidating on the large number of approaches and methodologies that the bank is using to talk about how do we offset or reduce the harm that we are doing with the big development projects. That unfortunately, the big development project is itself so huge and visible that all these efforts and methodologies somehow get lost and are not known to the larger audience. So I'm glad we're talking about these issues. And that's where actually I want to bring in Sean, because he's a person who has really worked with such campaigns and communication strategies. I want to ask you, Sean, what are the most critical messages we need to communicate globally with general population I'm talking about, or to communicate globally, to inspire a deeper connection that people need. We get caught in this arguments and these debates, but the connection between people and nature is also being lost. And I think that is also a very important driver of harmony and sustainable development. What do you think are these? What is the most critical message you need to communicate now at this juncture?
First of all, namaste, everyone, and happy World Biodiversity Day. It's a great pleasure to be here. I speak to you today from Canada, far away from the lovely hot weather of India. But having spent many years in India, I wish I was with you. It's a great question, Vasanti, Ma'am. I'm very fascinated at the moment by this concept of what we call transformative change. We talk a lot about transformative change in the world. We throw it around as a term. We need transformative change. And our two other esteemed speakers have given us good examples of transformative change activities on the ground. But last year, we had a special gift in the environment community. One of the two IPBES reports launched last year was on transformative change. And over 150 experts spent 3.5 years breaking it down and understanding how we can make a shift in the way we live together, the way we work together, the way we operate together, that brings about the transformational moves we need for long-term sustainability. And I cannot think of a better day than World Biodiversity Day to reflect on those. And there's 5. First of all, we need to protect the places that matter to species and people, to nature and people. Focusing on those is a big leapfrog in terms of having real impact on the ground. The second is to work with the sectors causing the most damage. And these are where my two esteemed colleagues are real experts in the space, as people working in the biodiversity boards, in the bank, thinking about how we change the way agriculture happens, development happens, land use planning happens, resource extraction, forestry. When we look at these sectors, we can shift the way they work, even just a little bit, we can make big impacts on the biodiversity. The third transformative change is to change the way we look at money, the way we look at the economy. My colleagues will agree we have a lot of perverse incentives in the way we create. We don't give full economic value to nature. We don't recognize it for its long-term contributions. And there's many different ways we can relook at the economic system. But if we don't shift the basic triggers and levers of the way our society works, it's unlikely we'll get the big change in behaviors we need in critical sectors. The fourth change is to look at the way we do governance. When you bring in real everyday people, different stakeholder groups, right from the grassroots, but all the way up to local government, national government, and the UN, when we work, and groups like the World Bank, in that paradigm of a deeper sense of integrated stakeholder engagement, makes a huge difference. When you get people to the table very quickly looks different. The last one is where I want to go a little deeper, because the last one was very unexpected to me. And it really speaks, Dr. Rao, to the nature of your question. The last one is we need to change the way people connect to nature. And I love that Dr. Pradip is talking to us today from outside. It's not a screen drop behind him. Those are real flowers, real trees in the beautiful state of Goa. This is nature. And when we connect to nature, it changes everything. So my big message is, when you take your child outside, when you take your friend outside, when you organize a trip outside, when all of these things which we think are small, they're not small. Every action that connects someone to nature is part of the transformation we need. Because when you're connected to nature, you can fall in love with nature. And when you fall in love with something, you protect it every way you can. You shop different. You raise your children different. You educate different. You get different jobs. And you vote differently. So my big message on World Biodiversity Day is get everyone outside, help everyone connect to nature, and realize it's not a small action, it's a transformative action.
Absolutely, absolutely brilliant as usual. Sean, you really captured the essence of why we are having this conversation. We need to all get out there more often. Really, thank you very much for those key, very important, challenging messages that need to be now looked into deeper. And how do we deepen our connections with nature? Dr. Pradip, I want to come back to you because you're the closest right now with what is happening on action on ground with communities in making what both Mr. Piyush mentioned and what Sean mentioned is happening on ground. What do you think are the key lessons from implementing biodiversity conservation and sustainable development initiatives in a state like Goa, which is very controversial and there's so many ecosystems and so many challenges that could be valuable for other regions or at a national and an international scale?
Thank you. Excellent speakers, both of them, and it was pleasure hearing to them. I would like to say that Goa is blessed being a coastal state, right from mangroves, right from sand dunes, which are first line of defense, mud flats, which are first line of defense. Then we have low-lying agriculture, we have uplands, we have grasslands, we have short plateaus, we have bigger plateaus. Then we have Western Ghats, which is a heritage site which is connecting us. So having such a excellent setup, we are already bestowed with the responsibility to conserve it. People are extremely sensitive. Any decision that the government takes, people will examine it from environmental perspective because we have been inheriting the nature coexistence. And as I said, sacred groves are there in Goa also. Many of them, almost every village will have several of them. So when we talk about how we implement it on the ground, what are the challenges, what are the important lessons? First tenure when I worked, I think I am the largest serving member secretary in our country. I will be completing 1 decade as a member secretary. So first 3 years when I worked, I was talking to people about conservation through its emotional values, through its ecosystem values, the important values to people. And when we talk to people, we have to talk in their language. We cannot tell them the language of the ecologists and the experts, which we are already convinced. But to convince the person whose livelihood depends on the ecology and to convince him that him or her that you should use it sustainably, it's not easy because sometimes there is lack of resources, and whatever handful resources they have, they know that the demand is huge, and there is always a conflict between the productivity and the conservation. There is one department which is saying that you have to have more productivity per square meter, and there is another department like us which we say that you protect natives, conserve the resources, allow the birds to be pest control agents rather than pesticides. All these things, in a way, when your food demand is huge, there has been always a conflict. But then I said, as Sean said it very nicely, we cannot talk our language and we cannot convince them. So we spoke in their language. We came out with an initiative where we connected conservation with the livelihood. So you ask about the lesson. We took up a project where we said that, come on, which are the bioresources which you feel that you cannot conserve because they don't give you value in returns, because people only understand the language of money sometimes, and we have to explain them in their language. We want conservation. So what we said, we'll connect conservation with livelihood. And that is one initiative we started. We created a state brand, which is owned by the Biodiversity Board. So with this brand, we said that if 70% or 80% of jackfruit is wasted bioresource, we will convert it into value-added products right at your doorstep, so that you will plant more jackfruits, which will again conserve nature. This is one of the examples. Similarly, when we protected wetlands, we said we will have an integrated management plan wherein the community around will be benefited because of wetlands. You are already benefited, but people do not understand sometimes the ecological values. So how to explain them about the potential economic values, how to convince them about the potential economic values and existence value, all these different types of values of biodiversity, how to convince them, continuously have a dialogue with them, develop that rapport. Because to be very, very honest, there is a lack of credibility when we go as government people or when we go as public organizations. People examine. Of course, there is a great trust also. So when we developed this brand Goan and we developed value-added products, we had a great faith from the people, and they buy our products, and this money goes back into conservation part of it. So we developed a model where fair, equitable benefit sharing connected to the value addition, and it doesn't stop there. We came out with
That
the
sounds
voluntary Shrama Shakti se Jal Samruddhi, means you do voluntary
right.
cleaning of water bodies and we will have prosperity. So many such lessons. It takes half an hour to say what we are doing. But to be in nutshell, in one line, if I have to say, we have tried to connect to the pulse of the people, try to understand and inject our agenda, which is for their posterity.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Pradip. Thank you so much. And while we are in this conversation of, thank you for also sharing those examples. And then that actually triggered my next question. And I want to go back to Sean because you talked about these messages and also communication and education strategies and this wonderful schemes that you have started, not just with monetizing conservation values, but also these bring me to Sean, the next question about how can effective communication and education strategies bridge the gap between conservation goals, like Dr. Pradeep mentioned, and the needs of the diverse communities. Like, for example, we talked about fishermen. The fishermen will, how do you communicate with them? Their livelihood is at stake. What about youth who are looking for jobs and the traditional jobs are being lost because of climate change? When you talk about fostering harmony with nature or falling in love in nature, as you rightly pointed out, this job aspect or this loss of livelihood aspect has to be integrated into this concept. So how do you communicate and what are these effective communication and education strategies that can bridge this gap?
So I want to build on what Dr. Pradip said, because he said you need to speak the right message to the right audience. Sometimes I think we, as a community, we want to be able to tell people what to do. And frankly, none of us being told we like what to do. If you tell me don't eat a sweet, I might just run out and eat a sweet. We live in an age, especially with our young population, where we need to work with them with the messages. And I like to think of a few simple but profound ways it changes the way we think about communication. And I'll give a few examples. If we do this right, we meet our audience where they are, not where we want them to be. We may want them to be environmentalists, but they're not there yet. They're on their phone. If they're a young person, they're on their video games. Maybe they like to watch TV. So we have to find a way to motivate them to get outside. Frankly, I don't care if that's iNaturalist, a school trip, or Pokemon Go. Anything that gets someone outside that works for them is all that matters. Second key message I say is it's very important to frame our messages with love in a positive way. Negative messaging is very tempting to do, but it doesn't work in the long run. It's good for short-term behavior change, but it's not good for the long-term shifts in values that we need. So framing our discourse in a way that invites the audience to be on this journey of love with us, this connection with nature, this connection with each other. I call it a culture of conservation and care. care for the planet, but also care for each other. If we're not caring for each other, we can't care for this beautiful, diverse thing we call the planet and biodiversity and all those connections. I'll leave you with a last key critical piece in the way I think we need to change messaging. And that's that we need to have the messaging reach people in many different ways. If people hear something from one source, they're questioning. But imagine, for example, the World Bank puts out a really smart report that says, evidence says getting people outside makes a difference. Dr. Pradip in Goa creates opportunities for children to get outside with their teachers, reduces the cost of transport, and gets free access to a park. Dr. Vasanti, with her team at CMS, put on a film festival on nature that connects people at a film festival. Some local journalists cover it, the schools cover it, the teachers cover it. Then we have a surround sound of messaging. And that's what will affect an audience, which means we have to work together. That's my point. If we want to do effective communication, it means each of us looking to the other people on the screen, looking at all the people we know and saying, what can we do together to get messages out there? One extra little tip. Stories work wonders. The power of stories is amazing. Not everyone can read those World Bank charts. And I know that the World Bank, when they produce a report, they also take the time to make that report into a story, into a narrative that the audience can engage in. And that's what makes a difference. That's how you spend 10 years in your job doing good work for biodiversity in Goa, because you're a good storyteller. And stories make a big difference.
I completely get that, Sean. I've seen you you're an excellent storyteller. So thank you for all those tips. Those are really, really very useful to connect to different audiences, and the 360-degree approach and working together. Collaboration is the key. I don't think we have the option now to work in silos at all. So we worked in communities, and now I want to go to country level, and I want to go back to Mr. Dogra and ask him, what are these promising approaches different countries are adopting to successfully balance these development ambitions, which most countries have, with the critical need to protect biodiversity and also the natural capital that Sean and Dr. Pradip just talked about. Can you share some of these approaches that are being introduced perhaps in India through the bank's engagement? Dr. Piyush?
Thanks, Dr. Vasanti. I think excellent discussion going on, and I clearly agree with Sean and Dr. Pradip. Bringing in integrated approaches is very, very important. That's the only key in this case. And we have to also honor the wisdom of our traditional communities who are there in the field, especially the tribal, the indigenous people. And bringing that into mainstream is a big challenge. It is a game of numbers, as rightly pointed out. But it's also important to bring those numbers in a lucid form, in a candid form, as all of us were agreeing to, that story is important. Bringing in those content in the clearly understanding terms, which is easily digestible, is important. For example, the India's program of life is equally contributing in that. It's an important program. It's a very solid message and a strong message which Prime Minister of India is giving. So I will give one small example before I come to the question which you have raised with me. For example, biodiversity could be a primary driver of green jobs. We were expecting and we were developing this project in India, and then there we saw that biodiversity offers a great potential for economic growth. Every dollar spent on nature restoration is expected to lead at least $9 economic benefits. So that is one. Second, in Global South, forests are the resource of livelihood for 1.6 billion people. And bringing in Ayurvedic, Unani, homeopathy, the medicinal aromatics and herbs into this whole discussion would be a great work which we have to bring in, not only for the conservation, but also for the economic development of the communities as a whole. And that is what we are bringing in India. As you asked me what approaches we are bringing. One approach which we are bringing in India is to bring in landscape approach to look at the forest. Don't look at the forest individually as the forest, but forest agroforestry, inside the forest, outside the forest, bring in soil conservation areas, and then adopt an integrated approach to then bring that whole agenda of green jobs in for this whole discussion around biodiversity. Now, when it comes to various levers or the financial instruments which internationally global countries are adopting globally are clearly on the, if you ask about financial instruments, from the bank perspective, I would give you green bonds are one important example. Green bonds are designed to raise capital for the projects with positive environmental impacts. They have become significant tool for financing climate adaptation and nature-based infrastructure, attracting investors and sustainable outcomes for that matter. Carbon funds, second would be, these funds finance projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, providing financial incentive for countries and companies to invest in clean technology and clean development mechanisms. Blended finance instruments. Blended finance combines public and private sector funding to support sustainable development projects. This approach is particularly effective in mobilizing resources for large-scale environmental initiatives, leveraging private sector investment for public good. Biodiversity finance. The International Finance Corporation, IFC Biodiversity Finance Reference Guides provides a systematic methodology for direct financing flows for investment that promotes sustainable management of natural resources and conserve ecosystems, as Dr. Pradip was mentioning about various initiatives of Goa. I think internationally also people are moving on this direction. And in this, some of the important examples, as you were asking, biodiversity bonds in Colombia remain to be very, very successful. Colombia, one of the world's most biodiverse country, has issued the world's first biodiversity bond with the support of International Finance Corporation and IDB Invest. And thus around $70 million bond is dedicated to mangrove conservation, climate smart agriculture, and wildlife habitat restoration. So this is what it's in there in Colombia. Blue bond in Belize is another example internationally, which they have done really well on protecting zones of biodiversity in marine spatial planning. Integrating policy framework, for example, NBSAPs. India is also developing a good NBSAP program. Issue is now to implement, which Dr. Pradip very clearly mentioned that, you know, it's not regulation of the policy framework, but how to get it implemented at the field level. That's a very important aspect. And there we need examples internationally or nationally. I would say that, you know, Great Green Wall Initiative of Amazon or Sub-Saharan Africa are also important example in this direction. And then is recognition of communities, recognition of indigenous land rights. Those are very, very important for the, and then work on the global agreement. So these are internationally how those practices are taking place. Nationally also, I would like to add the example of Meghalaya community-led landscape management. The government has come out excellently on the biodiversity management using various initiatives of cooperatives and green communities, bringing in green facilitators, empowering youth, bringing in women and gender emphatically in the whole planning and also into implementation, has changed the overall scenario and is coming up as a model for the Manrega scheme as well, where 60% of the work goes to the natural resource management. I think those are few initiatives which I am bringing in here, but there are many such examples. Issue is how serious that leadership, how to bring in that champion in those leadership in the development sector to bring in those initiatives into numbers and giving a good storyline, as all of us were agreeing to, so that at least those who are not speaking in front of you, their voice can be heard. You know, marine ecosystem will not come back to you and speak that we are being degraded. Forest ecosystem will not come back to you and say that we are getting degraded. It's we who have to take care, and we have to bring that story in front of the development partners.
Thank you, Piyush Dogra. I think those are amazing examples. Even I didn't know some of them. This is really informative and very interesting to know that such amazing experiments and approaches and instruments are being used, whether it's the green bonds or the biodiversity funds or even the NBSAPs. And I think the NBSAPs is such a powerful tool that not only connects governments and with the different stakeholder, but it also connects the communities towards it. So it's actually a great learning experience. So thank you for sharing all that you did just now. And I want to wind up this this discussion, because I think we've already done quite an interesting array of lessons and inspirations to take back and to I'm sure the audiences have learned quite a lot of interesting facts and figures that you've shared. But I will like to have the final last round of your messages, and I'll start with Dr. Pradip, because Dr. Pradip, can you share some examples from Goa? Now, really, I think the key is the community. So that's why, how essential do you think, from your examples in Goa, is the empowerment and involvement of local communities through, whether it is through the biodiversity management committees or any way that you already mentioned few, is in successfully implementing biodiversity conservation and achieving that harmony with nature that we all aspire for. So over to you, Dr. Pradip.
Yeah, I think when we talk about National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, I was there in Colombia, Cali this time when this NBSAP was released. And then in our state, we have made an attempt to prepare our state biodiversity strategy action plan. And there is where we found that it is done totally differently. We had more than 50 experts from the state under 16 subcommittees who have worked for almost 3 years prior to Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. When it was announced, we had already compiled all the secondary data and all the local scientists were involved. And I would like to say that maximum consultations. Now, in spite of having the preliminary consultations, when we prepared this GSBSAP, now we will be having again consultations on draft for almost 60 days at institution level, people's level, BMC level, even at Gram Sabha level. So I think when we saw that previous plans, they are not owned by people because they were not part of it. So when you make people part of the plan, then they become part of the action. Absolutely. And if you want them to be part of the action, then they have to be part of the plan. So that is what we have done in Goa. I'll be releasing it on 22nd February for the public consultations. Again, we had limited consultations while we made it, but now since the first draft is ready, that is one part of it. Secondly, I would like to say that initiatives like Green Bond, we also tried something like green skilling. There are many green skilling activities which we need to ensure that they are mainstream. They are brought into the mainstream because it brings down the cost of many projects, and you involve people in implementation. Like in Manrega, we are involving in wetland management, wetland survey. So like this, there are many things that can be done. And I think the more we talk to people, they only give the ideas, like how we can do it better together. More we work in silos, we keep on trying and it keeps on failing. I think the best key is working with communities, which we are already doing basically because of our people's register, which are most consultative and participating. Yes. And there are various techniques when you think how you want to do it, and it's a big area. It needs a lot of deliberations, time. And last point I would like to make is peer learning. If you ask me what is the most effective way of not only communication but involvement of people, is rather than teaching them for 5 hours or 50 days in the classroom, take them to the people who have done it. They talk to each other, they learn from each other, and you just become a thread in the garland, and the garland look beautiful. So I think that is what I would like to state from my side. And success stories which speak for themselves, which speak for others, which inspire others, is something that we have. Thank you.
Beautiful message, Dr. Pradip. Very beautiful message. I love that idea about how important it is to take people along in the consultation, and it has to have a public consultation. And of course, being a learner, I think we all are learners, and this conversation also is so much that we have learned today. Thank you so much for that. And you've actually resonated what I've already heard from Sean, and I love that. And I always remember that the problem of any problem, I think, Sean, it's better you say that the problem is always, the solution is always there in the community. I love the way that you say it. And actually, I want to I go back to you, Sean, is I want to talk to you and I want you to, use this occasion to talk about your experience with IUCN CEC and the Canadian Wildlife Federation, where now you are the CEO. What successful examples highlight how integrating local community that Dr. Pradip just now mentioned and their well-being is crucial for achieving both wildlife conservation and sustainable development. In India, for example, we think we talk more about tigers and elephants than we talk about people. So how do you balance this? Are there any successful examples that you can talk about how we can integrate this?
Thank you. I love this panel. Thank you, the team at CMS for putting it on. And a special thank you. Dr. Pradip has changed his backdrop, take us into a different part of Go and nature. I think the quote you were looking from me, Vasanti, is the answer to the problem already lies in the community. The answer to the problem already lies in the community. And I thought Dr. Pradip at that local level and built into Dr. Dogra's thinking is how do you unleash that knowledge and wisdom which is in the community already? Yeah. So I want to give 3 examples, 3 stories. And I've chosen these stories quite carefully because they reference different sectors of our society. One is in the education space. One is in the marketplace where people work and earn a living. And third is in the family, because all of these places are critical. And I'll start with the school. I love that there is a global movement to create outdoor green and learning spaces. We came up with this idea that children would learn better in a classroom with doors locked, with the best equipment in the world. And frankly, we got it wrong. As we look deeper and deeper into the data, into the analysis, we realize when children learn outside, it profoundly affects the way they engage. First of all, they're more likely to fall in love, like I spoke about. But they also understand the ecosystem. They understand how trees and agriculture and life cycles work. When you see the teacher as nature as a classroom, nature as teacher, nature as curriculum, then you begin to prepare students to get better academic outcomes, because the evidence suggests you get better academic outcomes, not just you get better socio-emotional health, your climate anxiety goes down, your health goes up, and if you imagine we need nature-based solutions, how can we have nature-based solutions if we don't have students and a generation equipped with nature-based education? You cannot create a nature-based solution if you don't understand how that, I think it's a banana behind Dr. Pradip works. If he doesn't understand how that works, then you can't operate effectively. So again, number one thing I love, creating green classrooms, living classrooms, getting children outside, and the community is doing that all over the world. We learned this from the community. Now teachers who are doing it. This is a very important year for education because UNESCO and the Convention on Biological Diversity is creating a global plan of action on education for biodiversity. It's the ever biggest global attempt, and I love these big global things when they're touched into local, to create a new way of looking at education for biodiversity. My second story goes to the family, and I'm going to jump from a global context to a small NGO in Colombia. And its NGO is called Outdoor Grannies. Outdoor Grannies. These are grandmothers living in urban centers of Colombia who recognized that their kids were disconnected from nature. And they said, we're going to get our grandchildren outside. They trained themselves on the local biodiversity. They found a good walk. They learned how to teach about environment, and then they started taking their grandchildren outside. There's something very special if we look at the data between a grandparent and a child. It's a very likely relationship for which love to happen. And I point to this very granular example because it's working. And those children are reconnecting to nature, so much so that the grandpas also want to get involved. They've still kept the name, but now you have grandparents on both sides. I would love to see a movement of outdoor grannies. I'd like to see Indian grannies taking their grandchildren outside, Mongolian grannies taking their. These are the innovations we can find when we look at the community and the solutions they're giving us. For my last story, I want to talk about the marketplace, because we often think the marketplace isn't flexible to environment. But if we're smart and we work together, we can find economic solutions that are good for environment. And I'm going to use an example that my NGO that I work with, the Canadian Wildlife Federation, works with. So we have a situation in our East Coast where every year a very endangered whale called the North Atlantic right whale comes to visit. Comes in the spring, early summer, and it comes into our bay. And it's the bay where all of the fishermen harvest our snow crab and lobster. We have a very busy, robust, financially important business around lobster and snow crabs. It's over a $3.5 billion industry. Okay, so this is not small. The problem is you harvest lobsters and snow crabs with gear on ropes. The whales come in, they get caught in the rope. And suddenly government had to put restrictions on that say, if a whale is there, you have to stop fishing. You have to stop putting ropes in. This affects the livelihood of all of those good fishermen who are feeding their families, keeping their community going on a sustainable resource. What we've been exploring is how to create gear, ropeless gear, that you can give to the fishermen. So when those whales come in, they move from using rope gear to ropeless gear. No more cost. It can be created as a community level response. For me, there's still ways to go in working out all the science and technology and policy. It means working with government and, of course, working with the harvesters of lobsters and snow crabs so they can be comfortable and safe with the new technology. But there's a route, there's a journey, there's a voyage we can go on together, community, NGO, government, and the business sector, to create a win-win for nature and a win-win for the economy. Those are the solutions we need to make a big difference. For me, there's so many beautiful examples of that in the world. We just have to lift those and keep working.
Thank you, Sean. That was beautiful. Really gave us an example of how at different levels we can work and with the community. And I love that idea that the answer already lies in the community, and you demonstrated that very beautifully. I think we can resonate with all the stories that you talked about, but because you talked about economy, I want to give the last word to Mr. Dogra, because, and I want to again, talk to him about what kind of policy levers and financial instruments can we really leverage at the national and international levels that Sean spoke about, which are more effective in incentivizing, the whole concept of living in harmony with nature. Because I think we're now at that stage where we really need incentives, which is so obvious to all of us, but perhaps not so much to people who depend on it, and find a sustainable development pathways. So over to you, Mr. Dogra, for the last word.
Thank you so much. I hope this won't be the last. But a great discussion. I'm really thankful for this discussion, and I think it is bringing us back to same discussion that for bringing all these to fructify into a development challenge and to counterbalance that challenge, it's important to have integrated policy approach.
Right.
So at the policy level, probably ecosystem-based management is one such word which we have to go further. We also have to work together on the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, because those will integrate the aspects of biodiversity, not in the local level or the national level, but also with the regional level. This connection with the regional level is totally missing currently. So that's second. And third is green growth strategies. Himachal Pradesh in India was one such state which brought in first green growth development policy loan for inclusive green growth and sustainable development. You won't believe that that state at one point of time led this whole work on watershed management, benefit sharing with the communities on the hydro benefits, and also on the integrated approaches to flow of rivers, environmental flows, brought in for the first time in the country. So this is not that examples are not available. Its issue is, again, we need champions to take those things forward, like Dr. Pradip. We need champions like Dr. Pradip. We need champions like, those who are working in the financial sector or in the development sector like us, with Shyam and others. We know that how challenging it is to convince, even to bring a project on forest conservation or a project on biodiversity conservation. It's very difficult. So I think the story is important. Numbers are equally important, but there are approaches. So if there are approaches and we are bringing those approaches into the development sector, this will definitely bring results to us, whether it's ecosystem based or MBSAF's integration or green growth strategies. On the economic part, I think payment on ecological services is one great instrument, which why I'm advocating this is that we have seen an example in Meghalaya. Meghalaya government came up with the idea of payment on ecological services to conserve their natural resources. And as you know, there are a large number of sacred groves and other areas such as, living root bridges are available in this in the state of Meghalaya. 6,600 such living root bridges. But the conservation, who will take lead? Because we are more into exploiting tourism. Yep. Meghalaya came into that idea of bringing conservation to living root bridges using cooperatives. And it is paid so well that so far 45 cooperatives have been constituted. They are taking decisions, no concrete, only nature-based solutions in that whole approach for bringing in tourism in those areas. Similarly, that PES services, payment on ecological services, which Meghalaya has brought in Green Meghalaya program for the state. And Chief Minister is leading this whole work. So I think we need those kind of examples in India to take this forward. And there are states who are doing it. There are states who will work. And it's only the question to bring them in front of public, bring that in the local dialogue. That these are few examples. I would say that on the economic part, in addition to PES, carbon pricing and trading is another area which is emerging out. Not very clear which side it will go, but still that's another area where we should now focus so that at least benefit should go to the communities at large. Similarly on the PES part and biodiversity offsets. It's important also to look at biodiversity offsets. I'm glad that Goa is becoming a successful example. We should document this. And I think, sir, we would be very happy to discuss with you also separately and bring in as much important lessons we can bring in from your initiatives. On the technological part, I think I would mention that precision agriculture is one such area where we should work. Remote sensing and GIS, India is already leading this whole work on remote sensing and GIS and bringing technology into it. It will also give an edge of developing those projects. And important of all is community-based conservation and recognition of indigenous land rights. I would re-emphasize that these are very important leads for all of us to focus, work together. And I don't think so that things will not come our way. Biodiversity is the investment for the now, and we should work towards biodiversity conservation right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dogra. I think that's a very positive note to end the discussion today. Thank you again for all of you, Mr. Piyush Dogra, Sean Southey, and Dr. Pradip Sarmokadam to join us for this very insightful conversation, which is, even I learned a lot of new things that I didn't know. But clearly, I don't want to summarize what happened, but I just I think one thing that I want to reiterate, sustainable development and regeneration, as we just spoke about, starts with all of us. Every action and effort matters in this endeavor to regenerate our beautiful nature and, importantly, the biological diversity of this beautiful planet. It is now time for action. I mean, I think we've done enough talking. There's enough learning. And there's still that will continue. Obviously, such talks will continue from each of one of us, and all that is possible at all different levels, starting from community to governments to institutions to corporates, all stakeholders. I hope the conversation today was inspiring to take away some necessary actions. Thank you again for joining us. You can listen to other discussions on our series, including this particular discussion, on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Thank you again to CMS VATAVARAN team, Sabyasachi Bharti and Kencho, for organizing this beautiful discussion today. I hope you all take back, hopefully, and contribute what we can to our planetary well-being. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great World Biodiversity Day.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mr. Piyush. Thank you, Pradip V. Bye-bye.